amazingly controversial tonight, but one never knows. So thanks all for tuning in to our Monday Night Live with the Geography Capstone course, co-hosted with Gusto, a panel with graduate students in the Department of Geography for folks who might be interested in grad school someday. It's great to have folks here. I think we've got 4 of our 5 panelists have signed on. So Christian Pedersen, Sarah Black, Shelby Ingram, and Austin Stone. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a second. So I'm going to ask them to just say briefly their name, kind of what their general area of focus is, who they're working with, and what year they are in the program, the kind of the standard grad school introduction. But before we do that, I'm also going to just give you the general layout's going to be, we're going to talk a little bit about why folks got involved in graduate school, what they like and dislike about doing it, and then what advice besides run the other direction they have for folks who might be considering grad school someday. So that's it. Great to have everybody here. So I'm just going to pick someone. So Sarah, I was talking with you already. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you want to introduce yourself just briefly?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Sarah Black. I did my undergrad at UGA, so I've had a 10-year relationship with this place, but I didn't go straight through. I work with Dr. Jen Rice. I'm a 5th-year PhD student, and I actually went straight to PhD kind of by accident. I started a master's, and then I got a grant and then I just changed and then I became a PhD student. And I study, my field site is in the Hudson Valley, where I also live. I have been a community organizer for a long time, and I do a lot of activist work around food justice and prison abolition. And so my dissertation is about the interfaces between agricultural landscapes and stories we tell ourselves about them, like small American farmers, and there's a lot. I could go on forever. But so basically about agrarian narratives and the ways that makes landscapes racialized. And so I study prisons, food, land, how that all fits together in the Hudson Valley.
Great, thanks. I think Austin, you're next up in my Hollywood Squares. Do you want to?
Great. So hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. My name is Austin Stone. I'm a 2nd-year master's student working under Dr. Marguerite Madden. I also did my undergrad at UGA. I did mine in geography as well. I worked for a couple of years before coming back to my master's. But I also work in an agricultural landscape. So Sarah, it's really cool to hear you say a few words about what you're working on. But I kind of look at it from a different perspective, more from a technical, ecological, and biophysical side of things. So I primarily do a lot of remote sensing, in GIS. So on my assistantship, we're working with the USDA down in Tifton, Georgia, where they have an agricultural research service, and we are looking at crop regionalization. So we're experimenting with using remotely sensed data on a local scale from drones all the way up to regional scales, so satellite data. And we're trying to find ways to find common characteristics about the agricultural landscape from a regional perspective through remote sensing. And this would ultimately help the USDA kind of take an inventory for what crops might be available on an annual basis. So lots of really cool stuff. We're still kind of in a infancy stage of this project. We're looking at incorporating things like machine and deep learning into this, which is a little far over my head, I'll be honest, but we're working with statisticians in the stats department who are really, really helpful in that effort. So yeah, it's a really cool project. I work a lot with corn, cotton, and peanuts. Those are my 3 big crops that I tend to work with. So the field behind me is actually one of our peanut fields that we work in.
You're not there right now, though.
I'm not there now, no.
Shelby, you're next.
Hey, so I'm Shelby Ingram. I am a first year master's student in geography. I work under Dr. Tom Moat. So our research is focused on drought in Puerto Rico. More specifically, I'm interested in like socio-ecological vulnerabilities in Puerto Rico as it relates to drought. So also some of those agricultural things that Austin mentioned and looking at biodiversity and the impacts of climate change on how drought is, I guess, evolutionary or developing as time goes in Puerto Rico. And I do a lot of climate modeling. So I guess that's the other end of it for my research. So using global and regional models to look at drought and dust. And yeah, all of it.
Cool. Thank you. Christian.
Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all of you, and it's nice to see familiar faces and some other people who we have yet to meet in person, but now we get to meet on the Zoom. And so my name is Christian Pedersen. I am a doctoral candidate in the Department of Geography, which means I have passed my comprehensive exams and am writing my dissertation. I am a 6th year PhD student, if I didn't say that already. I'm currently in the process of writing my dissertation. And my work sort of broadly has focused on transitional justice initiatives, meaning countries that have experienced periods of intense and protracted violence and are now making transitions into democracy. I look at the processes that they follow. And so this has ranged from things like historical memory to now the creation of United Nations sponsored commissions that fight impunity and that see corruption and impunity as part of the lasting legacy of internal armed conflict. So I've done research in Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay, Guatemala, and also Cambodia. My dissertation research focuses on Guatemala. I'm always doing sort of back and forth field work these days. Right now I'm in Athens, but a few weeks ago I was in Guatemala for a field work, socially distant COVID safe field work stint. And so it's exciting. It feels kind of timely to be thinking about because now the Biden administration is proposing creating new anti-corruption commissions for Central America. And so it's exciting to be studying something that yet again is really relevant in the news. And I just realized I didn't say who I work with. I work with Amy Ross, Dr. Amy Ross, who's a professor in the Department of Geography, but who also right now, yeah, Rachel, who also right now is the director of the Latin American and Caribbean Studies Institute at UGA.
Great. Thank you all. In the interest, I'm going to ask one other question, and then I'm going to create some space if students have some questions. But I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. I'm going to combine a couple, which is kind of what were no, I'm just going to go with the second one. What are the best things about being a graduate student in geography?
Do you want us to go in the same order?
No, I'll just let you all chat, and if somebody doesn't talk, I'll call on you.
I can pop in, and I think that I started graduate school in 2016, which was a big year. I graduated college in 2014, another big year. That was the year that the movement for Black Lives sort of launched in the form that it is in. That was the summer that Mike Brown was killed. And I felt really lucky and also so challenged by the things I was learning in graduate school were helping me understand the things that were happening in the world. Both when I was taking more quantitative and interdisciplinary classes with, I like the balance here of like human and physical, or in the mixed geographers that are on our panel. So like taking a community GIS class with Jerry as a graduate student, but also taking a really rigorous class on the theories of property and how, race and has been like enshrined into racial difference and really dramatic experiences of life have been like enshrined into our cities through very specific mechanisms that it was like having a veil kind of lifted off, and you learn the skills to talk about it and if you are doing it well and you're sort of putting it into your own voice, then you can be a really effective communicator about things that that other people are not afforded the opportunity to sit around and read about. So you have to be a very sort of humble communicator about it because you're kind of lucky to have the time to study. So that feels like the best thing about what it's like to go through a critical human geography program.
That's a really good point. And even coming from like the technical side, like having colleagues in that same area of focus and having conversations with them has been truly rewarding, because that's something that, you know, getting that type of insight and that education is something that is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
For me, my favorite part about being a part of a grad program is just being able to be in close proximity, or I guess access now, to a lot of brilliant minds. So in remote sensing, you know, every week it seems like there's something new on the corner, a new application, a new methodology. And it's really, really fun to get the chance to be in the mix of all of that and see how it's working, kind of getting hands-on opportunities to work on the stuff directly, which is very, very cool. I also personally love attending conferences. So student discounts is great for attending conferences and being a part of professional societies. And that just allows me to get the chance to network more, which is really, really cool too. So I really enjoy the networking aspect and just being around lots of different minds that really help give you that insight for what's going on in the world, technically and socially.
So I guess in my intro, I didn't talk about my undergraduate background, but I started, well, my bachelor's is from UNC Asheville in atmospheric science with a concentration in climatology. So it's really science heavy, and I didn't get a lot of that like social intertwined in my undergraduate studies. So coming into, well, I guess what's important for me is that my climate research is reaching back to community, and it has some type of climate adaptation, mitigation, feedback that it leads into. And so coming into this geography program I'm able to introduce like vulnerability assessments into my climate work, and actually speaking to communities and how they define drought and what type of metrics actually matter on the community scale. So, you know, me being from Charlotte, North Carolina, I don't know that stream flow isn't a trigger in the tropical rainforest of Puerto Rico. But so from my science background, though, I would assume that, you know, stream flow decreases, I could say the drought is on set. But for the community there, it doesn't actually mean that. So being in this program, I think for me and like having that geography science cohesion is important, and I like it.
It is super cool. So I feel like I might echo some of the things that my fellow panelists have shared, but I do think that, I mean, another way of saying it, I think, is to reflect on having really good graduate student colleagues, having like-minded people to be in classes and seminars with you. The program really at UGA in particular, since we're thinking about it specifically, does seem to admit people with a kind of with similar interests, both to the faculty, but also to their peers. And so having a really strong cohort of peers is really crucial as when we're trying to like understand the relationship between race and property. But at the same time, that also really speaks to the faculty and the interests and expertise that our faculty have for leading these kinds of seminars and also for their own research, that they're really like, they themselves are deeply invested in these questions. And by becoming a graduate student, you're in the room, and the seminar is like maybe a little bit different than some of the undergraduate classes, because the seminar is like, you're really like thinking, like everybody's trying to figure it out, even the professors. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. And so now you're joining the discussion about trying to realize what's going on versus a lecture where you're being told what's going on. And that's a very different kind of training, but it's an engagement that requires the whole room. And I think that that's something that's like really cool and powerful, and can exist in certain places, but in our particular program really does, I think, for the members of the department community, really reflects the interests of all people who are involved in that community. And the last thing is, I really do think that like our faculty, as I've looked around at faculty at other institutions, our faculty really are interested in like being good teachers, and really are interested in the like intellectual pursuit, but also in teaching. And in other institutions where research is a priority, faculty will say, no, research is a priority, don't put very much time into your classes. And from what I have witnessed from our faculty, is that they really are like interested and engaged in having good classes, really strong classes through all levels, and particularly also at graduate levels. Like that doesn't go away. And so that's actually like really cool.
Yeah, just to echo a few things, my 2 cents. So first of all, I'm going to say, post questions if you have them in the chat. Sarah already got it started in the chat. Or if you have a question, you can use reactions to raise your hand, and I will see that and try to call on you. But just while we're thinking about that, to echo what Christian said, or what all of y'all said, I think the interdisciplinarity of geography is a really common theme. I know when we talk about it as undergrads in the capstone course, that's also the case, that a lot of people are drawn to geography because it makes us think in really kind of broad ways, and think across various kinds of epistemologies and disciplines. But in terms of like the graduate seminar thing, I think those can be really, as Christian said, they can be really rewarding, and they're often a case where faculty are like, I don't have time to read these books, I want to read them, so I'm going to do a graduate seminar, and we're going to read them together and figure them out. And it's a very different kind of experience than taking a class that faculty have taught 5 or 6 or 7 times, right? Because it's much more exploratory that way. But it's a great experience. I know as a faculty member, it's really rewarding too, because grad students push you. They're experts just as much as you are. Okay, so with that said, at this point, are there particular questions about anything that's come up so far that students want to ask? Mary, go ahead.
Sorry, you could only use like clap or thumbs up
Oh, you can't?
on my thing, so it wouldn't let me raise my hand.
Well, let's use we'll use the clap as a raise hand.
Okay. My question, I guess, is specifically for people who like didn't go straight into grad school from their undergrad. Like, I plan on kind of, I'm worried that if grad school is on my radar and after a couple years in the workforce, I decide, okay, this really is something I want to do, and I feel very set on it, that I will just kind of lose any connections I had to kind of departments I'm interested in and like academic interests I have, maybe professors I had talked to, and I'll just kind of go into my master's cold and just like having no idea how to reach out to people who to reach out to. And just like for anyone who maybe waited a few years, what was that experience like, kind of like re-engaging with academia, if that makes sense?
That's a great question. And to be honest, when I did my undergrad, I had really little intentions on going to grad school. It wasn't really like I was done with school. You know, I'd done it for so long and I'm ready to move on, get some money in my pocket. Well, I started working, and I was really fortunate. I worked with the NASA Develop program, and I moved through the ranks over the few years, and I ended up getting a chance to work at NASA Langley Research Center. So I got to work with a lot of really, really interesting people with a lot of really interesting ideas. And at this point, I was pretty far removed from doing anything academic related, but I was talking to these folks and they were just really, really interesting and really inspiring, to be honest. And I knew that, you know, after working there for a year, I was really dead set on like, wow, I really want to get the opportunity to move up and, you know, do some of the things that these people are doing. And so one common denominator is all of these people had advanced degrees. I had a lot of people kind of talk to me through the process, give me advice. What should I be looking out for? What, you know, make sure you know what you want to go for. Talk to different departments before you go there. Just make sure you have a connection with like potential advisors. Make sure you have like a project in mind, or maybe know like the general application or research interest that you want to go for. And so, you know, getting the chance to talk with all those people and hearing from tons of perspectives, it really helped me kind of figure out, okay, like, yes, I do want to go to grad school. And yes, I do want to sharpen my skills in this emphasis. And for me, it was agriculture. And so, yeah, I think getting, just talking with people who have like maybe been through that experience before is really, really helpful. So this panel in particular is really useful for this. And one of the biggest things for me, like going back into academia that was kind of hard was, you know, losing a routine almost, because academia seems like it's as soon as you wake up to as soon as you go to bed kind of job. And I don't say that as like a negative thing, but it's fluid, unlike you know, that regular 9-to-5 job. So that was one thing that was kind of hard, and just kind of getting myself back into like the whole school setting, like writing papers, I think was kind of like the initial challenge. But you know, the more you read papers, the easier the writing comes, and honestly, the more exciting writing becomes too. So yeah. So anyways, I kind of answered your question, Mary, but I hope that was helpful.
Sarah?
Yeah, I that's such a good question. I took 2 years off, which was less than I thought I would. I never thought I would go to graduate school. And I had done all this, like, I had a nonprofit skill set. So that was I worked like that when I was in college, and I was on the boards of some nonprofits, and I wanted to get like a program director job. But by the end of college, I was so burnt out, and I got kind of lucky because I helped design a position at an organization as like a board member for a program director, for like a kind of entry-level program director job. And I thought, well, they're going to hire me because I know the organization so well. And they actually didn't. There was somebody who was older, more experienced, brought in very important and necessary diversity to the organization, and was just a better fit. And they hired somebody else. And the next day I got offered a job to go work on a farm, and which is what I really wanted to do anyway. So I worked on farms and in bakeries and in other land work it was 3 years, I think. But well, how does that math work out? The point is that I was pursuing a lot of things I was really passionate about. And I wanted to go to graduate school after a point, because I was confronting a lot of questions that I was working for this network of farmers who use land and food as organizing tools to confront, mass incarceration. And I was like, what? Like, how are you, like, how's that story make sense? Like, what do farmers have to do with prisons? And then I started to learn there, and I wanted to go to graduate school to learn more. But I was really afraid, and I have mega imposter syndrome. And Jen Rice, I had taken classes with her while I was an undergrad at UGA, and I just reached out to her and was just like, can you give me some advice about how to do this? And I think maybe we talked about it a little bit at the end of my term, at the end of school at UGA. And she was so generous with her time. She helped me prepare applications for other schools. She told me to apply to UGA as a backup. She just kind of, she let me, she, you know, gave me a little bit of her time and talked it out with me. And then I ended up getting like nice offers from other schools, but just realizing that UGA was the right fit. And initially I couldn't read. I can read, but I you know, I really challenged myself in taking some like upper level theory courses, like right off the bat. And it was really demoralizing because I didn't know how to read for graduate school and how to be a sort of strategic reader and a strategic note taker. And that's a hard thing to get over. But if you, like Christian said, if you have good community and if you can be gentle with yourself while you like reacclimate to what school is like, and just give, you know, and I really appreciate what Austin said about not having a schedule, like figure out a way to kind of live in an unstructured time, live with a lot of unstructured time, then you can definitely, like, you'd be really surprised at how adaptive you are when you're in your 20s, and you can figure out a lot of different ways to come back into the school setting. But I wouldn't be afraid about losing any kind of critical capacity, losing too much touch with somebody. Like, I think if you have an authentic connection with somebody right now, in 2 years, even if you've taken a break to go do what you need to go do in your professional and personal life, you still will, you know, you can still like reach back out, you know, as long as you don't drop any kinds of balls or something, then yeah. And the thing to always remember is that graduate applications, you need to be thinking about graduate applications over a year before you'll start school, because the applications are typically due in the late fall, and then you start for starting the next calendar year. I feel like most kind of regular like research universities. So
Yeah.
so you're going to be projecting forward quite a lot.
I want to get to a question that Amelia had, but just to put again a point on a couple of things. So I took, just for perspective, Mary, I took 10 years off in between I got an initial master's degree in education, but then got a PhD in geography, and there's about 10 years in between those things. I mean, I do think I think what Austin said, one of the job of your advisors is to be that point of contact. So don't, you know, in some ways, like, I mean, I switched disciplines. I was an English major, I got an education degree, and then I came to geography. Your advisors and your program is what gets you networked in your discipline. And so, you know, if you're going to a good program, those folks will know, you know, you'll have a chance to present with them, to meet the people they know, all those kinds of things. And I think that's really important. I do think, though, that the writing thing, like what Sarah was saying, it takes a while. It takes a while to learn how to read and write. I remember I took a graduate seminar on neoliberalism with Helga Leitner and Eric Shepard, who are two giants of the discipline. And I was scared to open my mouth and say anything, because I was like, I just don't know how to put a sentence together in this thing. But it just comes with time, and it's just, everybody feels that way, and work with it. Amelia, you had this question here, which is kind of about, I think it's a good thing to think about in terms of the context of research universities. Do you want to ask it, or I can just read what you put down?
Yeah, I don't really know how to better ask it. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, it's like a couple people have said that UGA like still has valuable classroom experiences for grad students, and I know I've seen that because I've taken like dual like classes with grad students, and so I know kind of what some of their classes might look like, but I just don't understand what your grad school experience would look like if it didn't have class, if it wasn't like a classroom experience. I don't really know what research really looks like, because I don't have that experience. And then if that's what y'all are talking about, or like more one-on-one work with the professor, I just want to know what that looks like. Yeah, I don't know what
is like.
Yeah.
But I don't know, do any of you have experience, want to give some perspective on, like you say, UGA has a good teaching experience. What would a less good teaching experience or good classroom experience, what do you think that would mean from what you've heard or what you've experienced? Nobody wants to speak up on this one.
Shelby?
I've only had 2-3 full seminars, so someone else can take first before I go.
I will plug that there's the seminar model is common. It's exhausting. It's fraught. Like sometimes it's done really well, and sometimes it's done really formulaically. And the structure is often not what makes the class shine. It's the books that you're reading and the people that you're reading them with. And it's 3 hours a lot of the times in these theory classes. Now, if you're having like more, Austin and Shelby could speak more to like what classes are like when you're learning like an applied skill where you're not just sitting around and yakking for 3 hours. But I just want to flag that I also heard you ask, what is graduate school outside of classwork? Because the what is research is such a good question, because that really intimidated me too. But
yeah, I feel like I've never understood what research really is. Like I know what research is when I have to write a paper, but I feel like making the resources that I use in undergrad to write a paper with, like the writing aspects and like the experiences people have and that they write about, is what grad school is. And I don't really know how that actually happens. Like I feel like grad school to me, from like what Jen has said in the class that I have with her, is like knowledge production. And that sounds really like big and scary. And like, what does that mean?
Should we go around and say what research means to us or something?
Well, or maybe, I mean, I want to make sure we're kind of keeping, because we've got several other good questions already, but maybe just like, I think what that gets to is the question of like field work and primary research, right? And like so it's different than being in a classroom, because like as a grad student, especially even as a master's student, you know, a good chunk of your time is doing stuff that's not classroom learning. And so maybe if each of you could just share like some element of what research has looked like for you outside the classroom, in your context.
Yeah, I can go ahead and start us off. So just a little bit of so for research for me, I mean, it's kind of all over the place, and I think that's, you know, how a lot of us kind of operate. But for what I do, so when I'm not in the classroom and I'm out doing field work, I'm out in a field similar to this, or maybe this field exactly, but we fly drones over this field that have sensors on board. So they capture different images. And to be more technical, it's a multispectral sensor. So we're looking at different wavelengths that are being reflected off of these targets, which the targets are crops in our case. So we go out, you know, midday to where the sun's kind of up over top, and that kind of mitigates other factors. But then we, you know, go through all of our checks and make sure that everything's good to go on the drone, everything's good to go on the sensor, then we fly. And then after that, we have to go back and process everything. So we have to pre-process all the imagery and make sure everything is orthorectified and correct. And then we can go in and do further analysis. And so it's kind of a multi-step process. So I could be out in the field, but I only have to be out in the field maybe once every couple of weeks, and then have weeks worth of data to go in and analyze. And so I guess the other like key thing when you're doing research is just asking yourself why you're doing this, because I think that kind of helps remind you why you're out there doing that. And I just saw another question saying like, how do you not get burnt out? You keep asking yourself, just keep asking yourself why you're doing it.
Well, that might not be a key to avoiding burnout, but anyway. Shelby, do you want to share?
Sure. Can you repeat the question?
Can you describe in like a minute what's one element of what research looks like for you outside the classroom?
Yeah. So I haven't had the opportunity for field work yet because no travel to Puerto Rico right now. But in my research assistantship right now, we have been able to do a lot of virtual meetings with people from the National Weather Service and other like NOAA offices. So a lot of my outside classroom time is being spent, you know, either doing these meetings with the on-the-ground people to actually know what are the issues that we should be focusing on. So like those why are we doing this? What's important? Like Austin mentioned. And I also, a big part of our work is calculating drought indices. So looking at different data collection methods. So in like your undergrad work, there might be one data set that your professor gives to you to work with, but there might be a different resolution data set out there. And so what I do in my off time is look at the differences in like resolutions of data sets and what might be the most useful for our projects.
Kristen, do you want to, we'll have you share just real quick, and then we'll move on to some of these other questions, because I want to make sure we're getting everybody a chance. Just one thing you do that's research outside the classroom.
Only one. I mean, I think part of what makes it so exciting is that there's so many things that you can do. And I think is particularly for the more humanities side of geography or social science side of geography, like there is kind of a bigger question, like, do you like sit and read books and like think about them? And I think actually that's part of it, which is what makes it so exciting. But it's also, if you really like that thing like me, but then also if you do that in conjunction with a number of other activities. And so in my case, that involves like conducting interviews. It involves collaborating with the communities that I'm really involved with, both here in the United States, but also abroad, and recognizing their transnational linkages. It involves reading and assessing laws and seeing how laws are built and constructed. It involves watching like official discourses, like either by being present at an official event or watching a YouTube recording of somebody talking about why their institution like really matters. And then what I think is so exciting about the kind of the humanities or social science aspect and for a, like, what does an academic degree offer you that something else doesn't? Like, to me, it's like journalism plus, because like a good journalist records what's going on and they do a really good job and you're like, yeah, that's great. But like an academic response to that is, well, here's what's going on, but also here's why it matters. Like the people come on television and they talk about the migrant crisis and you like, and they've like pitted as this partisan issue, but if you have a kind of different vocabulary to describe it, all of a sudden it's like not a partisan issue, it's something that's like much deeper. And you really have a way of like describing and explaining that, where you can draw from a whole toolbox of methods and analytical tools that at once involve like reading and thinking and writing, but that also involve like going to places and talking with people. Okay.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and back to Amelia's original question too, I'll point out, so Amelia, at research universities, I think it can be hard as undergrads maybe to think about the fact that many of the folks who work at research universities are teachers only by obligation. And that in many cases, you've got folks who are doing, they don't want to be mean to their students, but they're certainly not motivated to put a lot of time into the doing good instruction at research universities. And we're certainly not, we are not incentivized to be great teachers in many research institutions. In fact, I will tell you that there are, I was given advice as a grad student to never admit that you like teaching in a job interview. That is something I was told not to say because it would be seen as being detrimental to my job prospects. And so I think there are institutions where the real job is that people are there to do the kinds of research things that we're talking about here, and that's not necessarily, the classroom gets in the way of that. And so you might not have teachers who are really that invested in having students have a good experience and just don't put the time into it. And that's unfortunate, but it's true of a lot of research places. You can also have just weird politics in departments. Our department more or less gets along pretty well, but there are departments where people hate each other and they've hated each other for 20 years, and that can be really uncomfortable. I want to move to Autumn's question. Autumn's got a couple of questions, and one of them, the funding piece, I'll let the grad students, Sarah's already responded some in the chat, but y'all can respond to that. But the question of motivation, since grad school is really grueling and hard, Austin already brought up the you kind of ask yourself, why is this important? Why am I doing this? Which can be a good or bad question in my experience, because there's times when it feels like, why am I doing this? But how have you all tried to stay motivated even when things don't feel super motivating?
My motivation thing is attending like conferences and talks. So hearing from someone that has been through, the academic courses that I've been in, and now they're in their career job and speaking somewhere on a topic that I hope to one day maybe be speaking on, or maybe speaking to them. And that usually kind of helps me. Sometimes I'll play like, if it's, so there's a drought series that has been going on, and I've missed some of those. And so while I'm writing papers, sometimes I'll just like play the webinar in the black background. So I'm like kind of getting some of that information that I like while doing things that might burn me out.
I like the point that you brought up, Shelby, about attending conferences, because I will say that, during a non-pandemic time where everyone's able to get together, you kind of learn what research is going on in the world. Like, I think that's kind of really cool. And to think that, like, so let's say I'm a master's student, but I'm listening to someone who has a PhD and 35 plus years experience presenting on a topic that is just so cool, is real, and something that you're potentially working on is really motivating, and kind of seeing how the world is changing, and especially in the world of remote sensing and GIS. There's so many different new applications out there that are really inspiring. So yeah, I think that's one way to not get burnt out, is to really immerse yourself in all the advancements in your field.
I don't have a great answer for this. I am burnt out. I've been burnt out for like 3 years. My secret is that I go to therapy. I take breaks. I take time. A nice thing about graduate school is that you have unstructured time, especially my program was, most programs you do concentrated coursework to start. And here, I think it's normal. We were encouraged to like finish your coursework, like get your coursework out of the way. And you really only sometimes you're only taking 1 or 2, maybe 3 classes, but it's not like undergrad where you have a really full schedule all the time, repeated classes. So there were a lot of days that I had to myself, and I had to learn it restores my spirit to like clean my house and take time to myself, and to break the cycle of like self judgment, self-abuse, when you're like, oh, I'm not working hard enough. Because that's the passive time you spend like cleaning or gardening or doing whatever you like to do. You're also probably chewing on the things that you've read and like marinating in the things that you're doing. So, yeah, I've like felt like a fraud yesterday, but then I made a little bit of progress in something kernelized for me. And I'm so glad that I didn't, chicken out halfway through and quit, because I think I'm going to write a cool project. And then the deeper you get into it on the human side, and then I think on the applied, like the more like technical sides, like there's often like jobs at the end of the tunnel. If you're just doing like a dissertation about your sort of like niche passion, it can be scary, because the academic job market is scary, and you can struggle to have a hard time conceptualizing what you're going to do after, if maybe you're like, I don't know that tenure track work or teaching is for me. But I loved what Christian said about it being like journalism plus. So having some sort of idea about like, I've had a lot of like fantasy escape routes. Like, it's like, I'm going to keep going, but if I have a backup plan, I'm just going to go start farming again or something. And that's the truth, I think. Not to discourage anyone, but yeah.
I'm going to keep us moving here. Thanks. So Kelly had a couple of questions. Kelly, do you want to pick one?
Sure. So someone who is interested in a lot, how did you choose your specific field of interest? Like, you guys are all in such specific things. How did you know that that was what you wanted to do?
That's a really good question. And I feel like even if you're really passionate about what you're doing now, I feel like grad school kind of opens the doors for so many different other opportunities too. But for me, I really liked remote sensing in GIS. I knew whatever it is I was going to do, I wanted to do it. I wanted to apply my skills using remote sensing in GIS. And so what ended up happening is I started working kind of closely with an agronomist, and I started like hearing from he was kind of like a mentor for me. So I kind of started picking up things with remote sensing in terms of using it for agriculture. And I got the chance to attend some meetings primarily focused in that field. And so that really inspired me. And I was talking with Dr. Madden, who's my advisor, and she happened to have a opportunity to work with the USDA for my assistantship. And so that kind of tied everything together. It was kind of a fortunate case. So like I was just asking around for grad opportunities to see if anyone had any leads, and that one happened to pop up. So that's kind of how I got tied into agriculture. But knowing that I had like this skill that I wanted to refine and to like kind of build a that niche application for was how I kind of found myself in this area. I'm also from rural Georgia, so it was kind of a natural transition.
I've always been interested in weather and climate, and hurricanes were my big thing when I was little that I was super interested in. And so that flowed into in undergrad, figuring out like precipitation and precipitation anomalies being like my climate thing. But I still didn't know did I actually want to do research and if like climate research was for me. So I'll plug now internships. So I also worked with NASA Develop, like Austin, and we overlapped for a bit of time working with them. And Develop, you're actually like a full-time employee, so it's not an internship exactly, but opportunities like those definitely can help you find your niche and find out exactly what area and like skills you prefer and like to use.
I like the idea of the internship. Also, okay, so let's see. So my own story is that for a long time, I've been very interested in questions of human rights. And at the same time as being like very interested and invested in human rights, I've been like kind of bothered by the way that many people refer to human rights, and they're both in their presence and in their absence. And I was kind of going along and I found research and writing from my now advisor, Amy Ross. And one of her like taglines for her research interest is she researches human rights and wrongs. And that really actually like fit very well with how I was thinking about human rights as also very closely related to human wrongs. And so we started working together, and in the course of my field work, I also did my master's at UGA. And in the course of my master's work, I realized that the things that I was studying were very deeply connected with questions of law. And the questions around human rights memory were very closely linked with these questions of law. And so there are a few questions that I'm trying to answer all at once, hopefully doing an okay job. I was doing research in Guatemala, which is a field site far away from Georgia. Like one of the questions was, how do you like navigate working at a university that's somehow sort of far away geographically from your field site? And the answer is like the experts for different areas and different regions get jobs at places that are not in those regions. And so you can go to work with people who are thinking about certain themes who may not live in the like closest geographic proximity to the things that they study. Like there are people who study like the US border who work in New York State, the US-Mexico border who work in New York State. And so like somebody might go because you were interested in the research that your potential advisor or future advisor is doing, you might go to New York State to study the US-Mexico border. You don't have to go to Tucson, Arizona. So that's kind of part of the answer. And then also as I was like doing my research about human rights memory and thinking about the relationship between human rights and human wrongs, I recognized that that process was really linked with law, and that the future career that I wanted, as other people have mentioned, the future career that I would want, either it was going to be in some sort of teaching position at a university, or it was going to be in something that was really like related to justice, to law and to justice. But in order to do that work and to have the kind of conceptual framework that I would need to be able to carry out that work, I knew that I needed to continue studying. And so I applied to a number of different programs where there were people who had a strong concentration with thinking very critically about the law and law's relationship to power and to colonialism. Like, not like law is not the solution, but actually how is law like implicated as part of the problem of creating human rights and wrongs. And UGA happened to have that. And so while I got into other programs, I actually stayed at UGA to be able to continue to work with people who were really like invested in these themes, and were doing so in a way that felt very meaningful, that I knew that I wouldn't be able to. There was this really hippie lady who I grew up near, and she said, you have to figure out a way as you're like going through life to turn your passion into currency. And I realized that if I was going to turn my passion into currency in a way that felt meaningful, I was going to have to work with people who were like really ready to like guide and engage me in a certain way. And so that's how I picked UGA, not that it's geographically close to Guatemala.
Sarah, did you want to say anything at that point, or we're kind of transitioning into Patrick's question?
I think I already kind of described, I was working and I saw something interesting and I kind of thought, that'd be a good project.
Yeah. I'll say from my perspective, I wanted to do something that involved GIS and food systems that would have would be something that could get me a job someday. And that's kind of how I ended up doing what I was doing for my dissertation, which was studying food access and food deserts. Okay, well, Patrick, do you want to, is there a part of your question you want to try to ask? As we're going to try to wrap up around 8, but we've got about 5 minutes left.
I think Christian actually answered it really well in terms of kind of what I was interested in.
Okay, well, maybe, so 2 things. I'm going to ask the grad students if they want to put their email addresses in the chat, and if people want to contact you afterwards, they can. And then I'm going to ask you all to give a kind of closing word or benediction about what's one piece of advice you would give for an undergraduate who's thinking about graduate school. What would be your tip? And I'll give the attendance stuff after that. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was saying I don't want to go first.
Well, you're unmuted now, so.
Okay, my one tip for somebody thinking about going to graduate school, not somebody in graduate school, right?
Yeah, somebody so like you've got 24, 23 students here who are mostly here because they're thinking, many of them are thinking about grad school someday. What's one thing that you think would be important in making that decision for them? One thing they should do if they're thinking about which program they should apply for, any of that?
Don't be afraid about what you don't know yet, and don't let that hold you back. Also, don't feel a need to like perform like expertise about the discipline you want to enter. I think the most important thing is to just try to be yourself and do a little due diligence when you research programs, and reach out to faculty respectfully, but just to see. You're going to want to look at different programs, look at who's doing what in the program, maybe read some of their papers. You don't have to come up with a whole list of questions, but just don't be afraid to ask people if they have time to tell you about the program. And the more that you can kind of like resist feeling really intimidated and like the power dynamic, I think people act sort of shy. I think the better you'll be able to like articulate yourself and remember that you're smart and you're capable, and you'd do good work in graduate school.
Yeah, I totally agree with Sarah there. One thing that I did that really helped me is basically interview other people who are in grad programs, and just ask them about, their entire experience. I know like we're doing this panel, but I feel like I barely scratched the surface from like my decisions, the process I took to get to grad school. So and like Sarah said, it's okay to like not know know everything, that you don't have to know everything. Like that's what grad school is for. It's an opportunity to really enhance your knowledge on certain topics, and explore new ones. So I think just kind of getting a perspective from other folks who have kind of been through this process. And since we provided our emails, I'm sure any of us would be happy to have a one-on-one conversation about going a little bit more into detail on how we got here. But I definitely think that helped me. And other grad students will share resources too, which is useful for like, here's how I wrote my statement of purpose or whatnot. So I think that's pretty useful.
I was going to say what Sarah just said in the chat. Ask a professor, advisor, if you have an older friend that has been through a master's PhD program similar to yours, even better, if like same department, same university, have them look at your materials and review them. Sometimes, I don't know about like UGA's Career Center, but I think UNC Asheville, like we were able to go back and like if we were any program or anything, like we could take them material and let them review it. So yeah, look into like things like that, so that you can get as many eyes on your materials before you submit them. What Austin said, reaching out to not only the professors that you're considering as your advisor, but their students as well. Their students can tell you a lot about the day-to-day, a lot about how their lab functions, and you might be able to even just like pick up on personalities of like the office and things like that, because that's also important aside from getting the technical and academic and all of those great skills. You also want to make sure that you're working with people that you're happy working with. So I think those would be my big things.
Okay, Christian, you get the last word.
Okay, here we go. So here's the thing. So we've been talking mostly about research graduate degrees, but I think it's also important to remember that there are professional graduate degrees, which involve a very different course and program structure. So it's good, I think, just to keep that in mind. Like you don't, like most of us are talking about writing a thesis or a dissertation, but also you can go and get more advanced coursework in a particular area in order to reach a particular objective. And it doesn't require the same kind of research intensity as a research-based degree. So that's, I think, good just to remember. The thing that I would say for people considering graduate school is go, apply, and go because you know that it's the thing that you need to do to be who you need to be or to do what you need to do. Don't go because it's a social or family expectation or because you're not sure what to do next, particularly for research degrees. It's just not worth it. And also, the salaries, they don't get better. You reach a certain point, I've been looking recently, and people with master's degrees are they're up here, and then you get a PhD and it kind of dips a little bit. It doesn't move proportionately. And just to be aware of do it because you need to do it to either do the kind of work that you want to do or to be the kind of person you want to be, but for no other reason, and to know that that's it, and then to move forward from there.
Awesome. That's a great place to end. Thanks. So first, let's just give a round of applause, virtual or otherwise, to our panelists. Thank you so much for a really engaging and energetic panel, and it was great to have everybody's voices as a part of this. And I really appreciate your taking time out of a really busy time in the semester to chat with students, and it was great that we had such a good turnout here tonight. For those of you who are in my capstone class, because it is a capstone class in geography, we're doing it on various capitals. And so they have an attendance quiz every week that is a capital, and in honor of Sarah's field research, we're going to do the capital of New York, which is anyone. This is part of the class. You have to know what it is, right? Yeah, Albany. Thank you. So that is the attendance word of today. So for those of you who are attending this for class credit. Otherwise, it was great to have you all here. I think any of these students, would love to chat with any of you more if you've got questions. I'll stick around till everybody's gone if you have particular questions for me. But thank you so much for all this great wisdom and advice. Sarah and Shelby and Christian and Austin. We'll see y'all.
Literally anybody reach out.
Thank you.
I love to talk to prospective students. So
Same.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye, you guys. Thank you for
Bye.
coming.
Bye. Thanks, Emily.
It was good to see you.
It's good to see you too. All right, bye, y'all.
Professor Shannon, I have to
Yeah.
tell you something exciting.
Hold on, I'm
and
going to stop recording first.